Over the past few years, we've seen a dramatic increase in anxiety, depression, and just overall sadness in our society. Many link this to isolation, a pandemic, war in Ukraine, but I have a different theory. I think that it all really boils down to the Disney Star Wars sequel trilogy. So for those who are unfamiliar with Star Wars, it's essentially a space opera that follows such themes as good and evil, and also the locus of control a person has over their own destiny. Now, my journey with Star Wars began in 2005 when my mother showed me all of the original 3 films, and later in 2010 when I saw all of the prequel films. And these 6 films were the cornerstone created by George Lucas between 1977 and 2005 of what became known as the Star Wars saga. Now in 2012, he sold the company to Disney for $4.05 billion. And ever since, they've been producing new Star Wars content, including the sequel trilogy adding to the saga. Now, this is going to be the main topic that I'm going to be discussing today, because as we'll find out, it presents a lot of issues. So, I believe that Star Wars should have ended chronologically with the 6th film, Return of the Jedi, made in 1983, and that the sequel trilogy should be removed from canon, or what is considered to be part of the franchise. So, we're going to be talking about what the Disney trilogy is and why it's not aligning with current Star Wars purposes and values, how the saga was sort of geared towards certain purposes and meant to end, and how oversaturation is not really good for it, and how we should remove the Disney sequel trilogy from canon, and how Return of the Jedi should be reaffirmed as the final ending of the saga. Now, when one looks at this Disney sequel trilogy, it's easy to point out a few things that make it stand out from the previous films. Not in terms of different story plot points, because it's essentially a copy and paste in certain areas, but in the first films, you saw a rise and eventual demise of a tyrannical empire taken down by protagonists in a rebellion. But it seems like immediately when you jump into the new films, all of a sudden there's a brand new threat, basically a copy and paste of the empire, and everything was for nothing. In fact, Ben Sherlock, a man who spent his whole career in media and entertainment, had an article published called Return of the Jedi was the perfect ending to the Skywalker saga on February 8th, 2021, published in Game Rant. In it he said, right out of the gate, The Force Awakens did everything in its power to undermine victory at the end of Return of the Jedi. Now, this presents a lot of problems because Star Wars is all about being good and evil, black and white, painting a good picture that both children and adults can appreciate and understand in its simplicity. Now, this misses the mark on what Star Wars is, because if all of a sudden everything is, you did all of that work and now it's all for nothing, well, that's a little too realistic, and if I wanted something not close to the real world, I wouldn't be watching a space opera with laser swords. John C. McDowell had something similar to point out on it in his book, Politics and Big Fantasy, The Ideologies of Star Wars, The Matrix, and the Avengers, published on 9/17/2014 in McFarlane and Company Publishers. He said, after the trying times of Vietnam and Watergate, American audiences were eager to get the kind of reassurance provided by simple verities. Simple verities being good and evil and classic Star Wars and good, heartwarming action. Now, that aside, another thing to notice is that oversaturation can be dangerous for a franchise. So if you're looking at something like Star Wars, well, it already had its plot points sort of set out, and now all of a sudden Disney decided to add more to it. Now, this was all for financial gain, merchandising, and also just continuing the legacy so that they could get a return on their investment for purchasing Star Wars. Guns and Hassler Forrest, in their book titled Star Wars and the History of Transmedia Storytelling, published at the Amsterdam University Press in 2018, said, Lucas has openly expressed his distrust and cynicism towards the unchecked authority of the Hollywood studio system. This is, of course, talking about George Lucas, the original creator of Star Wars. Ironic, he decided to sell Persuasive to Disney, but it was a pretty big check. And this, of course, is a negative factor accentuated by the fact that Return of the Jedi was essentially meant to be the end of the saga. As Ben Sherlock also says in his article, this is the perfect culmination of Star Wars themes and storylines. He's of course referencing the sixth film, Return of the Jedi. Now, that being said, when you are looking at these problems, you can also find a quick solution, and that's to just simply remove these films from canon. And many might think that's impossible because of the amount of money that's gone into them, but if you look at what Star Wars is, at the end of the day, it's all fiction. And fiction, unlike non-fiction, is very malleable. You can pick and choose and take anything out that you like. Kevin P. Sullivan in 2015, in his Entertainment Weekly section in the new Star Wars canon, said the original 3 films and the 3 prequel films remained the cornerstone of the canon, meaning that you have the basis and everything around it was sort of just add-ons. It was a story. It wasn't actually an official Star Wars part of the saga. When Disney started adding things like that is when things became problematic and you started messing with the existing story. Now, another thing to note from that is you need to give back creative liberties to the people who knew the most about Star Wars, but the original creators and the fans like Dave Filoni and people who have given us so much through other Star Wars media outside of primary filmmaking. And this all brings me to my final point, is that Return of the Jedi really was meant to be the end, and it should be reaffirmed as the end. It's anything added on past that chronologically should be affirmed as a story, not an official part of the saga. Mika Olivera said in 2013 in Fan of Phenomenal Star Wars, published to Intellect Incorporated, his films have been used since their release, inspiring as they have thousands of fans to create their own extensions to his carefully crafted designs. Meaning, fans, including myself, have been adding media to Star Wars for decades. You don't need to make it an actual part of the film series. And in the end, it just comes down to following the wishes of fans, something Disney is not the greatest at, as John Wills makes very clear in that Disney has their own agenda. In his 2017 book, Disney Culture by Rutgers University Press, corporate Disney culture prioritizes expanding portfolios, the assimilation or Disneyfying of competition, etc. So we've talked about why the sequel trilogy is dangerous and not very good and coinciding with Star Wars, why oversaturation is bad, why we should remove it, and why we should reaffirm Return of the Jedi as the end. And that is why I think that we should remove those films and reaffirm Return of the Jedi as the end, because as we can see from money and inflation, too much of a good thing can become a bad thing.